President Joe Biden banned Russian oil and petroleum products today, and I'm going to talk to economist Ed Hurst from the University of Houston about how the domestic industry might respond to that. So, welcome to the interview, Ed.
Thank you, Markham.
Now, there have been a few producers in the Permian Basin who have said, we don't care if prices go up to $150 or $200, we are not raising production. Have I got that right?
Yes, you've got it right. You know, these companies have been whipsawed before. They're taking the same approach as the Saudis are and OPEC, which is to say this is not a fundamental change in supply and demand. And there's really no reason to go out and expose more capital only to have the price fall when this conflict ends, or if the Saudis decide to open the spigot again. You know, keep in mind the Permian and all of the US shale plays are among the high cost plays across the global oil market. And Wall Street has more than expressed its displeasure with the performance in the Permian for the last 6 years.
Yes, you and I've interviewed you about that before. I mean, Wall Street has kept the industry basically in business since 2008. And IBS gave the producers their marching orders that it was time to start returning some capital to the investors.
Yes, and now, of course, is a great time to return some capital to investors, pay down some debt, get the companies on a sound financial footing.
So where does that leave us, leave the United States if, the conflict continues, if more Russian oil gets taken out of the world market, and it seems to be, gathering, that trend seems to be gathering force. What would it take to get the shale producers to boost production?
Well, a continued high price. You know, keep in mind, the only reason we import oil from Russia is because it's cheaper than oil from West Texas. It's cheaper than oil from other producing areas of the United States. Unless the US producers can become competitive with Russia, become competitive with Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and other members of OPEC, the only way we're going to be able to get back to any kind of semblance of oil independence is to impose import restrictions. This is something we've talked about before. You know, our Canadian friends, the US and Mexico, forming its own bloc and restricting imports from other nations. Eisenhower did this, and that worked quite well until '73, when his vice president, then known as Tricky Dick to those of us of a certain age, removed the oil import quota and sent the US on a dire path of increased dependence upon foreign crude supplies. Today, we produce about 11.5 million barrels a day. We buy about 4 to 4.5 million barrels a day from Canada, and the rest comes from the global market. And we're very, very susceptible to supply interruptions around the global market. You know, we've seen the price of oil go up over the last couple of weeks, and because of the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. And that's primarily because of the financial sanctions that have been imposed on the Russians. No one was able to buy the Russian crude, or at least pay for it. The Russians aren't very good about taking IOUs. And so a lot of that oil has been sitting in storage in the North Sea.
Now, we saw, it was yesterday or the day before, there was an American delegation that went down to talk to the Venezuelan government. And that hasn't happened for some time because, of course, there have been American sanctions against Venezuela, and the output there, oil output, has plummeted accordingly. And Venezuela used to be a big supplier to the US. What do you think the odds are that, the US might remove some or all of those sanctions in order to get more Venezuelan oil flowing and, potentially into the US Gulf Coast?
You know, I can't place a bet on what the thought process is in Washington, D.C. right now. The Venezuelans have underinvested and basically allowed this industry to deteriorate over time. You know, it's not that the U.S. wasn't buying their oil that caused their problems. It's that they weren't reinvesting in their own oil patch. They could just as easily sell that oil to Japan or China or India or another nation that needs it, they're not dependent just on the United States. They have fundamental problems with their society and their economy that just simply removing sanctions from the US can't fix.
Yeah, I read a few articles about how their infrastructure is deteriorated. Refineries that have been sitting idle, pipelines that are sitting idle, broken, and would take a lot of money and time to bring back into service.
Exactly right. I mean, this would not be a fix because of taking Russian crude off. This is a several-year investment, and keep in mind the Russians own an awful lot of the Venezuelan oil field infrastructure. So do the Chinese.
Now, one of the things that President Biden said in his remarks about when he banned the Russian oil is that still the long-term security is this shift over to clean electricity, to renewables, wind and solar and batteries and electric vehicles. In your opinion, if we have higher prices for any length of time, is that what's it's going to take to really kickstart the American electric vehicle market?
Well, the American EV market is expanding. It's growing rapidly. But yes, extended high prices of gasoline and diesel will accelerate this. The largest selling vehicle in the United States is the Ford F-150. And I don't mean the F-150 Lightning. I mean the internal combustion powered F-150, the one that runs on diesel or gasoline. Not everybody needs one of those in a driveway.
Well, true, but it seems like a lot of people want in the drive, at least the electric version. The Ford has already expanded production quotas 3 or 4 times, and it looks like we're going to have about 150 or 200,000 in the first year of production. So, well, Ed, thank you very much for this. Always appreciate your insights.
My pleasure, Markham. Thank you.